Everybody, so this video is going to be my experience of the Session 0 and Session 1 of my Dungeons & Dragons campaign, which is taking place in a custom world I made called Vloroa, which is based on a map I just found on the internet, which I heavily modified on GIMP to rename everything and make my own, which I have done over the last year and a half or so. Just my own little pet project. I never thought I'd be using it this soon, to be honest. But the Session 0 and the first session I thought went really great. And the Session 0 was just for us to come together and me give a presentation on an overview of the world, how things worked, what the expectations were, depending on which area they chose. And as well as before the Session 0, I sent them a one-page kind of a pitch of different campaigns for them to select, which would have placed them in different parts of the country, depending on our continent, depending on which ones they chose. And they chose to be in a country called the Realm, which I have inspired to be based off of Italian mixed with UK. Most of my countries are taken from real world cultures and just blended with random other cultures that they wouldn't ordinarily be associated with. I don't do it in any trying to make fun or point at. I just think that so many cultures are very rich and they're always associated with different types of weather or different types of visuals. So I wanted to take a new spin on that, which is my explanation for doing what I did. And the players, some of them knew exactly who their characters were, others did not, and a lot of it was just exploring the different gods, as I feel like Dungeons & Dragons has so many different rich histories and gods that they've created, but I don't ever see players really grasping towards those unless they're a cleric or paladin, which I find very strange. I really want the gods to be more prominent in Dungeons & Dragons, as well as it gives players a belief system automatically so they can view things differently, which I really like. So I really tried to steer the players towards picking multiple gods, either dependent on race or just on what kind of class they were or who they envision their characters being. But we ended with the following characters. Again, I have 6 players, so I'll go through all of them, and then we'll go into the first session. So we have Enzo, who is a half-elf warlock hexblade, and his family own a tavern, which is where the players will start in the first session, called the Jolly Dragon, which is just inside of the city gate. That's the really happening place. Everyone goes there at the end of their workday. So he is just a young, naive kid who runs this tavern with his parents. We have Waldo, who is a Furbolg druid, the Circle of the Moon druid. He actually lives outside of the city walls north in the forest. He has a very funny voice, and he seems like he's going to be a really great character. We have Wink, who is a elf, Eladrin elf, and he is going to be a evocation wizard. And all my players are starting at level 1, and he's had a tragic event in his past where he's a really wealthy character and now is kind of starting over. We have Olivax the Cracked, who is a Dragonborn Paladin. He's a brass Dragonborn Paladin. We decided he's going to be a servant of Bahamut, which is very on par for Dragonborns. He is more of like a Batman type character who is out for justice, bringing bad guys down. So he'll be really funny. He has a really great character voice, as well as my brother, who's the one playing him, is probably the best role player I've seen. He's really great at staying in character and just thinking and being his character when he plays. So I'm really looking forward to how his lawful side will clash with the non-lawfuls in the group and what that will entail. Then have Tink and Thadon, who are brothers, but they don't look alike. Tink is played by my cousin, who is a human artificer. He's more of like a rogue type as well. Grew up in a orphanage, which is how he knows his brother, quote unquote, who is played by my other cousin. Again, Thadon is his name, and he is a bugbear, which I love because bugbears are not known around the parts where they're starting. So I'm interested to see how the racial indifference will occur between where they go. Thadon, the bugbear, is a rogue. So those are my players, and that was a Session 0. We decided that they all know each other because they go to this tavern, the Jolly Dragon, owned by Enzo's family, and they do a trivia night. And over the last couple of weeks, they've really gotten to know each other during trivia night and have become a team. So that's what we'll start with. I actually wrote a trivia night for them so they can, number one, learn about the history and lore about my world. It's a way that I can sneak that in there, as well as lax environments where they can just role play and not have to worry about the unknowns, because it's there's a lot of unknowns when you're gives a new character, but this gives a very straight storyline, which is the reason why we decided to do that. I know it's very cliche to start in a tavern, but it seemed like this was the perfect place. I said at the end of the session that I would have like a board that they could pick from as far as like their first job together. I actually scratched that after the fact because I wanted it to be more linear at first, especially when you're playing in a big group. As a player, I found that having a lot of decisions out of the gate is not good because it has a lot of analysis paralysis and you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So I just decided to have one storyline, which I'll get into when I talk about my session 1. So session 1 started in a mining city named Alloy, which is on the northernmost parts of this country called the realm that they're in. I built out a storyline where they were going to have the tavern trivia night, and then everyone was going to go home. But Enzo's dad, who's the chef of the tavern, is going to request that they go and meet with another lady in the city outside the walls who runs like a soup kitchen. She's a really sweet old lady, and she's going to need their help for volunteering work in the morning. After that, they were going to get summoned by the wizard, who's going to give them a mission to go rescue a unicorn who's been captured, who lives out where Waldo, the Furbolg, lives. So that was my intention, was I want to get them just on an easy there and back again mission that puts them in good favors with someone high up in the city, giving them some point of contact that they can rely upon. As well as before the first session, my brother, who plays the Furbolg, had made a voice that he did not like for his character, and he wanted a way to get out of the voice and into a different voice that made sense for his character, as well as I wanted to hint about the unicorn during the trivia night. That way, when it was brought up again, they could remember, oh yeah, this was a known issue that they could accomplish. So starting the session, I feel like I did a really bad job at setting the scene. I was really nervous. I don't really narrate often, so I don't have a lot of practice doing it. I basically just had a picture of the tavern in front of me that I was trying to describe. Looking back, I should have just shown them the image and say, hey, this is kind of what the atmosphere is like, just because an image can say a lot more than horrible words can. At times, they were totally cool with it. They all met and they role played extremely well. There was a lot of funny moments between the characters, between Waldo, who's a very simple Furbolg, and Wink and Fadon, who are more articulate and have more expensive tastes. I thought the trivia night went really well, and the lore that I presented was well received from everybody. I definitely will be using that in the future if they go to other cities, potentially, to have more trivia nights that they can run into, learning different lore about each city and each place that they visit. It was very fun and easy for them. It does take some work on my end, writing up all the question and answers, but something I'm willing to do, as it's not that much of a heavy burden. So they ended up winning the trivia night, and how I dealt with my brother, who wanted to change his character voice, was they won a potion of like a spa day in a bottle, basically, and I allowed the bottle to like change his voice in a way, because prior to trivia night, I had Waldo's brother say that the reason why his voice was so raspy and talk like this was due to him sitting close to a fire growing up. So I thought that was a funny way to resolve that issue. So they won 3 potions of this spa day in a bottle. And so Waldo, the Furbolg, drank one of them, and that cured his issue and allowed him to speak in more of like a dog voice. After that, they walked the next morning over to Ida's kitchen, which is the name of the sweet old halfling lady that runs the kitchen. The lady they were going to help volunteer. I let them role play as they walked over, which really helped me as I was very nervous for that first session. They took a lot of the weight off of my shoulders as they role played. And this was meant to be a character I wanted the players to really sympathize with and really like, because when I introduce the villain later on, I'm going to have the villain kill this character to really motivate my players to want to destroy this faction named the Chain of Orokef and hunt them down and find out what the heck it is they're doing and why they're acting this way. So they meet old Ida, who talks like this, and have you seen my grandson? As what she kept asking him over and over. And she slept in a cot right behind her little kitchen. And they worked the kitchen, and it was very funny because Waldo was the first one there, and he was basically it's served about 60% of all the clients or all the customers. So the rest of the group just basically did the last third and trying to recruit people as they served, which I thought was very comical. I was not expecting them to try to recruit and start like their own little businesses, but I just tried to think how these miners would think, which is the prominent work in this northern area, which is right next to the base of a mountain, would think. And they quickly realized that the prospects were very slim as far as what they were looking for. So that was funny. And then at the end of the session, I had Ida say that she had received a raven, which is the form of communication. Think like Game of Thrones, bringing ravens all about. She received a raven from the wizard for Enzo and the big blue man. And so they read that and headed on their way over to meet with the wizard role, who's the wizard of this city. On their way there, that's when I ended it. Looking back, I probably could have ended it with them meeting him to have a more clear, specific thing. Just because it's not the best when you start a session with, hey, I'm going to narrate now and then ask you what you want to do. I feel like it's better when you end a session with something very clear that's going to happen at the beginning. But that's just my opinion. My players all love different things about the game, which I've talked to at length with them outside of the game, which I really think is helpful. Like, what do you like about what you're getting out of this? And I'm always asking constantly for feedback. Like, what did you like? What can I do to improve? Just because I am so new, I don't proclaim to be all knowledgeable or knowing in the ins and outs of storytelling since I'm, brand new. But so far, I think that was the best session I could have hoped for. And most of it was due to them role-playing excellently. But stay tuned for the next couple sessions as they meet with Joel and head out to go rescue this unicorn. So we'll see you then.